Well, joining me now is the former Conservative MP, now a member of the independent group, Anna Soubry. Welcome to you.
Morning.
What's your feeling? Do you think that this meaningful vote is likely to be postponed?
I don't see how she can, for goodness sakes. You know, this delay and this dithering has just got to stop. And she gave her word at the dispatch box that she would come back and we would make proper progress this week. Those were promises made and they must be delivered on.
But wouldn't it be sensible to find a proposal that has got the majority support of the Houses of Parliament?
I don't disagree with you about that, and that's why tomorrow, certainly the group that I'm now a member of will be putting down our own amendment, absolutely to drive forward a process. And I know others agree with it. I'm not saying it'll get selected and voted on. There are others who have taken the same view, that we must do everything we can, one, to avoid no deal, and secondly, to make proper progress. So we need votes in Parliament to see where there is a consensus. From my point of view, whatever we come up with, I want it then to go to the people for them to determine the future.
But you see, I mean, this is part of the problem, isn't it? Because you want another vote, another referendum.
But I want to,
and the best way to get it is to break this process, isn't it?
The thing I'm actually more concerned about at the moment is making sure that we get no deal absolutely off the table. And it is to the eternal shame of this government they've not done that, especially when the House actually voted in favour of us removing no deal as an option. And the House was very clear on that. It was actually more clear on that than it was on the so-called Brady amendment. Mrs May chooses to follow Brady and ignores that vote, which is, as I say, to the eternal shame of a government that's meant to believe in business. And it's not just your viewers, of course, who are crying out for certainty and leadership, British businesses as well, and they are being profoundly let down.
Yeah. Well, except, you know, you say they're crying out for certainty and leadership, but the one thing that we know for sure another vote would do is prolong the uncertainty.
What would? A people's vote?
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, if you had a people's vote, you would... No, because you would know that that's where you were moving to. And I think it's quite interesting that yesterday Jeremy Hunt conceded...
But if we leave in 18 days' time, we'll know where we are as well. And that'll be a lot quicker than having another vote.
Yes, but that would be a catastrophe for our country. And in the words of the Brexit... Sorry, in the business secretary, it would be ruinous for our country. But a people's vote absolutely would begin to provide the certainty that we absolutely need. And Jeremy Hunt yesterday conceded the reason he doesn't want a people's vote is he thinks that people would vote Remain. So people need to understand that the only reason the government doesn't want a second referendum is because they think people would vote Remain. So they're prepared to take us out.
Honour the vote of 2016.
No, they are prepared to take us out of the European Union in the knowledge that on their own admission, the majority of people have now come to the view that the best deal we have is the current deal we enjoy.
Well, we just don't know, do we?
Union. Oh, no, I agree. But that was the logic of his stance yesterday, which is, you know, we can't have a people's vote.
I mean, the logic of his stance is similar to the logic of Michael Gove today, which is that you need a compromise, that the majority did vote to leave, but the manner of that leaving should take account of the 48%.
No, I think the mistake that is being lost and made in all of this is that it is absolutely right, and it is the case that 52% of those that voted for us to leave the European Union 2.5 years ago. And over the time, we've seen two things, I would argue. First of all, you can't actually do Brexit. You certainly can't do it and be true to the Good Friday Agreement. And people are entitled...
What do you mean you can't actually do Brexit?
In the sense that if you leave both, in Theresa May's terms, her red lines that haven't moved, you leave the single market and the customs union, then you will breach the Good Friday Agreement because on that basis you return to the hard border in Northern Ireland.
So that's what you mean? You don't mean that it's... Britain,
I just don't actually think... I don't think you can do Brexit. I mean, whichever way you cut it, you are in a position whereby the government's own assessments, and this is a Brexit government, show that the people of this country will have their future prosperity reduced. I mean, but that bears on MPs' minds. I mean, can you think of anything else where you knowingly vote for something, knowing it will make your constituents poorer?
I mean, the problem with that argument, and, you know, I was there in Brussels in December, is that the European Union, the 27, and the UK have agreed a withdrawal agreement which they say delivers Brexit.
Well, it delivers a form of Brexit. What it actually does is, as you know, only deals with the divorce settlement. And if viewers at home are fed up with the last 2.5 years, they need to know that the whole matter is far from over, even if we accept Mrs May's so-called deal, because there is no deal about our future relationship. That has yet to be determined, and it means that we face the prospect of years of more uncertainty, more rows and more chaos as we try to wrestle. And that's why I think it would be better. Now we know the reality of Brexit, get it back to the British people. They are entitled to change their mind.
You say the worst option would be if we left in 18 days' time without a deal.
Yes.
That is currently what Parliament has voted for in activating Article 50, isn't it?
No.
So how can it legally be stopped?
Well, we have to change the law, but in any event, we can ask for an extension. But can we be very clear about this? When people voted for that date to go into the Withdrawal Act, it was on the basis, it's really important, Adam, it was on the basis that that promise from the Leave campaign that we would secure a deal about our future trade and security arrangements would be settled by the end of March. That is what Theresa May promised in her speeches. And that has changed because that deal is far from being sorted.
No, but the point I want to ask you as a legislator, as a member of Parliament, is what it would require to stop Britain leaving with no deal. Because the truth is, the votes as envisaged wouldn't do that. They wouldn't.
Which votes?
Well,
because you'd have an extension.
After the meaningful vote, Parliament, as you say, has already voted once for no deal, but that didn't have any legal force. So what would it actually require?
It could have done if the Prime Minister had been good enough to respect the will of Parliament, but moving on, as you say. So there are two things that can be done.
But she could ignore the will of Parliament again, that's my point.
Exactly.
With 18 days to go.
But she can, if she accepted the will of Parliament, she can task one of her ministers, as the legislation allows, so that March the 29th is not activated as the trigger date. It may be that we have to go so far as to put into legislation the removal of the date from the Withdrawal Act. But there are other ways, as I say, within the Act, it allows the minister, responsible minister, not to trigger on the 29th of March, and an extension is what is now required. And she accepts we're going to have an extension.
But the longer you delay in Parliament, putting anything before Parliament, the less likely is that there's going to be time to do it before the 29th of March.
We've run out of time anyway. We haven't even started on the legislation, as you know. Even if Mrs May's deal goes through, which is obviously very unlikely, we would still have to put it into legislation in order for it to become a treaty, and that is simply not going to happen. So you're saying a delay... She's going to have to extend anyway.
Is unavoidable.
Oh, it's not me. It's the government that knows that. The trouble is with Theresa May, she's so stubborn. She went straight to square up to people. Unless we leave without a deal. Unless we leave without a deal, which would be the very worst option.
Which is what I'm saying, perhaps the clock's ticking down in that direction.
But the majority of members of Parliament, like the majority of people in our country, do not want no deal.
Yes, but can they stop it? They may not want it. Can they stop it?
Yes.
How?
Because, first of all, we can vote for an extension, and secondly, we can mandate the minister not to trigger on the 29th of March. Those are facts. There's within the legislation. It's within the Withdrawal Act. The idea that we can't stop no deal, of course we can stop it. Where there's a will, there's a way. The trouble is, this government is still playing hardball. I'm suggesting to you it's possible that this government is playing hardball and it's running down the clock. No, I think the Prime Minister is. Let's be very clear about that. We know there are a substantial number of ministers, we heard one only last night, saying that they will not sit by and allow our country to crash out without a deal. They now have the courage of their convictions. And if they need to leave their ministerial office, they must do it. And that's another hard blackmail game that this Prime Minister is playing, and it is wrong. And we will only do the right thing by our country when people put their own ambitions and their political party second and put the national interest first. And that's what must happen, along with leadership to lead people out of this dreadful Brexit mess.
OK, Anna Soubry, thank you very much indeed.